literally every day that your money, let's say hypothetically, this $100,000 stays in your savings account, it is losing value every single day because of something called inflation. But every day that you have this lump sum of money sitting in your savings account, it is being eaten away by inflation day by day. Versus if you take that $100,000 hypothetically that you have saved and you put it in a piece of real estate, you are, instead of taking a bet against inflation, you're taking a bet on inflation. Hi there, friends and family. My name is Mlouhi, and welcome back to another episode of In Harmony, giving you light and encouragement to pursue the incredible, abundant life that God has for you. And today we're talking about something very important, maybe not as philosophical or as spiritual, but today we're talking about something super important. One of the most important decisions that you can make in order to have the abundant life is to be financially stable, financially strong, and financially free. And one of the best decisions you can make to achieve generational wealth and financial stability is buying your first home. As you all know, or as some of you may know, some of you may not, I am a licensed real estate agent in the state of Texas. I am the listing agent and director of sales for a home building company, a custom home building company here in El Paso, Texas. So needless to say, all day I breathe in and breathe out real estate. I work with buyers and sellers selling new homes and resales. And I've learned a lot of things through the years of working in real estate and being around these people. A lot of mistakes have been made, a lot of lessons have been learned, but today I'm going to hop on here and share with you all the biggest tips that I can share about purchasing your first home and the first steps to take to buy your first property. A lot of people, a lot of young adults have been coming up to me asking questions about how to even get started in buying a home. And I purchased my first home last year, and I can tell you it was one of the best, if not the best financial decision I've ever made. And this episode is to encourage you to consider buying a new home in 2024. So without further ado, let's get started. So what is the benefit of buying a home? I've been renting my whole life. My landlord takes care of when my toilet gets clogged and all of this stuff. Why do I need to buy a home? I am here to tell you, my friend, that buying a home is one of the best financial decisions that you can make. In Jeremiah 29 verse 5, that's right. What does the Bible say about purchasing and owning a home? In the Amplified Version, in Jeremiah 29 verse 5, it says, "Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their fruit." So even we see that God's word encourages us to buy property and to buy real estate because we can reap the benefits of their fruit. So the first benefit of real estate is it helps you build generational wealth. When you own a home, this is something that you can pass down to your kids' kids, and your kids' kids for generation. And one of the other biggest benefits of real estate is that it's literally a physical savings account. Let me explain. Let's say hypothetically that you have $100,000 in your account. You have it in your savings account. You're super proud and happy for yourself because you're like, wow, I've worked so hard and I have all of this money here in my savings. But that money in your savings is actually losing value every single day. And I'm not a financial expert. I did get my degree in finance and risk management, but highly encourage you throughout this episode. I'm going to be sharing you all my opinion from working with buyers and sellers and purchasing my first home. And one of the biggest reasons to me that made me decide to put my savings in a home versus in a savings account is because literally every day that your money, let's say hypothetically, this $100,000 stays in your savings account, it is losing value every single day because of something called inflation. Every day that you have this lump sum of money sitting in your savings account, it is being eaten away by inflation day by day. Versus if you take that $100,000 hypothetically that you have saved and you put it in a piece of real estate, you are, instead of taking a bet against inflation, you're taking a bet on inflation because of something called appreciation. Appreciation is basically a fancy term that means if you buy a home for $100,000, you are expecting that over the years, the value of that home is going to increase. Hypothetically speaking, because of inflation, in 10 years, that home may be worth $160,000, $170,000. And that $60,000 to $70,000 gap is what's called appreciation. So when you put your $100,000 in a piece of real estate, you are taking a bet that inflation is going to happen, especially in the US housing market, and that your value, the value of your home, is going to go up every single year. So one of the second and one of the biggest benefits of real estate is having a physical savings account. Your money is there and you are taking a bet that every year the value of that investment is going to go up versus having that money in your savings account and having inflation eat it every single day. You are taking a bet on inflation, not against inflation. The third benefit of buying your first home, you are putting your hard-earned money into your physical savings account versus paying a landlord savings account. You are putting money into your generational wealth versus paying for your landlord's generational wealth. The fourth benefit is that it can also be income producing. That's correct. Your primary residence can also be an investment, an asset that is income producing, which we're not going to get into this in this episode, but this is something that I'm doing with my property. And it's something really it's kind of like an investment hack. So we'll be going into this a little later for another episode, but just keep in mind that you're buying your first home can also be income producing if you do it the right way. The fifth benefit is tax advantages. So when you purchase a home, you have tax advantages. A lot of times you can deduct the mortgage interest that you pay for your home and the property taxes that you can pay for your home. The sixth benefit is it helps diversify your portfolio. So let's say you're somebody who likes to invest in Bitcoin or the stock market or baseball cards, whatever that is, having money in real estate as well, or even buying your first primary residence can help diversify your portfolio. The seventh benefit is something that we touched on, which is appreciation. You are taking a long-term bet on inflation. Although prices will go up, your payment and initial investment is fixed. So basically what this one means is that if inflation happens, for example, if you live in the United States, in the United States housing market, if inflation is going up, typically when inflation goes up, so does housing prices. But although inflation is creeping up every single year, your house payment stays the same if you have a fixed rate mortgage. So this is important and something to keep in mind, which we'll go into a little bit later, that hypothetically speaking, if you have a fixed rate, let's say you have a 7% interest rate and your payment every single month is $3,000, even though inflation's going up, housing prices are going up, groceries are going up, probably everything else is going up, you are locked into that $3,000 every single month for the life of your mortgage. So you take a bet on inflation with real estate because of appreciation, and you reap the benefits of inflation instead of the drawbacks of inflation because you have a fixed payment no matter how much housing prices or inflation goes up in the US economy. So to reiterate, you can have more protection against inflation with real estate. Typically, as inflation rates increase, so do real estate prices. So those are the top 7 benefits of real estate based on my knowledge and experience. But what does it take to prepare for the purchase of your home? I mean, I have young adults who come up to me who have no idea how to even get started preparing for buying their first home. And is owning a home even biblical? In Proverbs 24, verse 27, in the Amplified Version, it says, "Prepare your work outside and get it ready for yourself in the field. Afterward, build your house and establish a home. Even the Bible talks about the importance of preparing before you make the investment. And that's the same case with buying your first home. You have to do preparation beforehand in order to be in the best financial position, spiritual position, emotional position that is required in order to purchase your first home. So the first tip that I recommend to prepare for the purchase of your first home is start saving now. This is not going to be an episode that tells you some get rich quick scheme, because I'm here to tell you, in my experience with real estate, those do not work. Those might get the most views, those might get the most shares, the most likes, but there is no get rich quick scheme with real estate. It is a long-term investment, but I promise you it's one of the best decisions that you're ever going to make if you do it correctly. But the first step is to start saving now. Even when I first started working in real estate, I was making $30,000 a year, 36. I was not making a ton of money. And even that amount, I was still faithful over it. I lived below my means. Absolutely. And I'm here to tell you, no matter how small your income is right now, whether you're a student, whether you're a part-time student, whether you're starting in your career, whether you're established in your career, you can start saving money now, no matter how small your income is. Also, obviously, with extenuating circumstances, that's different, but most of the time, there's always something that you can save. Living below your means is incredibly important because there's something that's called, lifestyle creep, where you make $30,000 and you live a certain type of lifestyle, pretty modest. But then once you make $60,000, you start to spend more. But the dangerous part is that you're spending more, so you're not able to save as much because of you're not living below your means. Saving, it's not as much talked about as much as making more money. But if you think about it, saving $1 is more important than making $1. Gurus will typically tell you, you need to increase your income. If you're making $50,000, we need to 2x it in order for you to afford your first home. But if you think about it, if you make $10,000 more in 2024, that's great. That's awesome. But you're going to have to pay taxes on that $10,000. The government is going to take its share. Versus if you save $10,000, you don't have to pay taxes on the money that you save. So saving $1 is more valuable than making $1 because of the taxes that the government takes. So never underestimate the value of starting to save right now, whatever income that you make, because it's going to accelerate you to being able to afford your first home. First and foremost, start saving now and live below your means. The second way to prepare for the purchase of your first home is to build your credit. This one's a no-brainer with most people. I remember when I first started preparing for the purchase of my first home, I had no credit. Well, I think I did because I had a student loan, but if I did, it was not good. So I remember, I'm not saying that you should do this, consult your financial advisor or do what you think is best. But I got a little credit card from my local credit union, and I just started buying like my lunch on it and then paying it off. And that helped build my credit slowly but surely so that I was in a good position to approve for the purchase of my first home. So build your credit. Typically, the higher your credit score, the more favorable terms you'll have when you start to purchase your first home. The next is establish good income history. Typically in real estate, being a W-2 employee is more favorable in terms of the lender than being a 1099. So typically the last 2 years of income history are the most important. So you want to make sure that you make a good enough income in the past 2 years in order to have the best terms to qualify for your first home. And the fourth way to prepare for the purchase of your first home is to manage your debt. Lenders will look at your debt to income ratio typically. Your debt to income ratio indicates how much of your monthly income goes to your debts and gives lenders an overall sense of how you're doing financially. So essentially, if you have any outstanding debt, my recommendation would be to manage it in order to prepare for the purchase of your first home, because your lender is going to look at your debt to income ratio, and if you're highly leveraged, you may not get the best terms. So that's how to prepare for the purchase of your first home. And as we're nearing the end, we're going to go into the first 3 steps to purchase your first home. The first step would be to find a good real estate agent. If you live in the El Paso, Texas area or in Texas in general, message me if you need a good referral, and ask around about recommendations for a good real estate agent if you live outside of the Texas market. But finding a good real estate agent, I promise you, it doesn't sound important, but it is very important. I do recommend that you are represented during the real estate transaction, and finding a good real estate agent can really make or break your first home buying experience. The second step would be to get pre-approved. A lot of lenders will tell you that you can get pre-qualified, which doesn't say as much as a pre-approval letter. A pre-approval letter basically means, hey, as the lender, I've talked to this buyer and I've checked their income, I've checked their credit, I've checked their savings, I've checked everything. And based on those numbers, this is what the buyers approved for to purchase this home. Whether you're approved for $400,000, $300,000, $200,000, this is how much you're approved for in order to purchase your first property. So getting pre-approved is the second step, and it's very important. Make sure to have a pre-approval letter, not a pre-qualification letter, because a pre-qualification letter is not as strong. It basically is just, oh, I make this much, but it's not verified. So get a pre-approval letter, not a pre-qualification letter if you're serious about purchasing your first home. A disclaimer about getting pre-approved is a lot of the time when a lender approves you, it's a pull on your credit. But if you're serious about purchasing your first home, you do need this, and it's worth that credit pull, because it tells you how much you can afford for your home, and it tells the seller that you're a serious buyer and that you took the time to get pre-approved. The third step to purchase your first home is to make a list of your non-negotiables and the items that you would like to have. So one way to manage your expectations and to manage to make sure that you get the best home possible for you and your family, or just you by yourself, is if you have a list of your non-negotiables. Kind of like when you're dating, you have a list of the 3 things, the handful of things that are most important to you, and then the other items are nice to have. So I meet with buyers who say, I don't care how big the home is, I don't care how big the bedrooms are. Most important to me is that I find a home in this subdivision below 600,000. Or some people say, I don't care which subdivision it's in, I just need to make sure that my lot is 10,000 square feet and that I have a 3-car garage. All the other stuff is not as important to me. Those are the most important things. So everybody is going to be different. There is no right or wrong, but it's going to help you if you have a list of the most important things for you that are your non-negotiables for your home, so that you can have a clearer mind when you go into all the homes that you're going to be viewing. And then after you do your non-negotiable list, something that helped me is I recommend putting together a wish list, or essentially things that would be nice to have. Having a non-negotiable list and a list of your wish list items is going to put you in a better position to have a clear mind and focus in on the things that are most important to you when you're on your home buying journey. And for the last part of this video, I'm going to be giving you my biggest tips when purchasing your home. There is no way for me to fit the entire home buying process in this 20 to 25 minute video. That's going to have to be a whole other series. But I'm going to do my best to give you the biggest tips that I've learned from purchasing my home and with working with many buyers and sellers and purchasing their home. But why do you need these tips in order to buy a home? Isn't it pretty clear cut? Isn't the internet going to tell me everything that I need to know? In Proverbs 24, verse 3 through 4, in the Amplified Version, it says, "Through godly wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge its rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." So if you all are looking for wisdom on how to purchase your first home, going on the internet is great. You should absolutely read books. You should absolutely watch videos. You should absolutely read articles. But actually talking to people, a family member, a friend who's actually purchased their first home and the lessons that they learned may be the best wisdom that you can have when it comes time for you to purchase your first home. So these are some of the biggest tips that I learned. I highly recommend, and something that I did, is to purchase a new home if you can afford it. It's not in everybody's price range, But when you have a new home, it is such a blessing because when you buy a resale or a used home, no matter how old it is, almost always, and in every home I've seen, it's going to have issues. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't purchase the home, but typically when the home is brand new and you're the first owner to live in there, and if you plan to hold on to that property for many years, potentially generations, it may be the best decision to buy a new home because it's not going to have typically as many issues as a used home, and two, a lot of new homes come with warranties. So a lot of companies have 1 year warranty for workmanship, 2 years for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and 10 years for structural. So you're protected by that warranty from the builder. Obviously, it depends on the builder, and make sure to ask that question on the warranty that's included with the new home. But that's something that a lot of resales don't offer. So typically you have less problems with a new home, and typically new homes come with a warranty. Which is why I recommend, if you can afford it, to purchase a new home for your first home purchase. My second tip is to put down a 20% down payment for your loan. So that's something that I did. I put down 20% because when you do less than 20%, and if it's a conventional loan, typically you're going to have to be paying something called private mortgage insurance. That's a fancy term for insurance that protects the lender in case you default on your loan. So even though it's insurance, it doesn't protect you as the home buyer. It protects the lender because if you put down less than 20%, you're considered more risky than a borrower who puts down 20% or more. The third tip that I have, this one's kind of silly, but to keep in mind, because a lot of buyers don't, is low maintenance for the home and also low maintenance for the landscaping. I could tell you having to do a lot of maintenance if you have real grass or a pool, not to say that you shouldn't have either of those things, but always keep that in mind. Buyers tend to think, oh, the home's $500,000. I'm approved for $500,000. I'm good. But if it sits on a 2-acre lot or a half an acre lot and it's grass or it's pool, always make sure to keep in mind the maintenance expenses that are going to be required in order to maintain your property. So factor that into the cost and in your home search as well. The next tip, and this is my most important tip, to buy the best home you can afford in the nicest area that you can. A lot of times, buyers, which there's nothing wrong with, will say, if I am approved for $500,000, I don't care where I live, but I want the biggest home possible, which is okay. But a lot of times, you can purchase a home that may be 3,000 square feet, but it's not in the best area, but it's 500,000 and you approve for it. That's home A. Versus home B, that's in a really good, high appreciating area. The square footage is about 2,500, so it's not quite as big as home A, but it's in a nicer area. I almost always recommend to go with home B. Buying in a good location at the best home that you can afford for is one of the best decisions, and is probably my biggest tip to give you. It's going to be better off typically than that home A that's in not as much as a good area, but you get more house. Because when you're in a nice area, even though there's some things that you may compromise, your appreciation is typically going to be higher. Versus here in home A, the appreciation may not be as good. And even though you get more house, which is also typically more maintenance and stuff, which we won't go into, you're not going to be reaping as much benefits on the appreciation aspect versus if you go with home B. So my biggest tip is to buy the best home you can afford in the nicest area you can. Location does matter. Even though something that I like to do, a tip is if I see a lot of construction going on in an area, that makes me so excited. If I see a lot of orange cones, buildings being built, shopping centers being built, businesses moving in, even though it's a headache and it's kind of annoying when you're leaving your home, I love seeing that because that shows me that people are investing, big companies are investing in this area, and that typically can raise the sales price or the value of your property if you're living there. The next tip is, I promise you, everything will sound expensive, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't purchase the home. Every home that you're going to see, you might as well just come to terms with it. It's going to sound expensive. It's going to sound overpriced, at least for that's how I felt, and that's how a lot of buyers feel. But you have to see the long-term picture. I am purchasing something that's going to benefit my family for generations. It is going to give my family generational wealth. And even though $500,000 sounds a lot to me right now, in 20 years, that's going to be like nothing. I've never met a person, I'm sure they're out there, who has regretted buying a home 30 years later. Everybody who I know who's owned a home for a long period of time look back and say, oh my gosh, I remember when I bought that $100,000 home on the west side, I was tripping because I thought it was so expensive. And now 20 years later, that home is worth $400,000. And that's one of the best decisions I've ever made. So even though it sounds expensive, even though it sounds overpriced, that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't purchase it, because you have to see the long-term picture. Next tip is to get a home inspection. Highly recommend that, whether it's a resale or a new home. And these are kind of more designer tips, is to get timeless selections. If there is something that's trending, that doesn't mean that it's going to be trending in 10 to 20 years. So the best bet may be to get and this is what I did for my home, is to keep the selections super neutral, super simple, super timeless. And if I want to express my personality or get creative or have fun, I could always buy pink throw pillows, pink bar stools. I could buy green plants or even paint. That's something that can be changed. But if it's something like a cabinet, a light fixture, a countertop, a floor plan that's just a little bit funky, that may be more difficult to change down the line. So best bet is to go with something timeless, something neutral and simple, so that it stays on trend for generations. The next tip that I have, and this is probably the second most important one, and this is because I've met with many buyers and sellers who have made this mistake, is to not obsess over the interest rate. What most people do is they see low interest rate means that it's a good time to buy, and high interest rate means that it's a bad time to buy. But you know who's also thinking that? Everybody else in the housing market. So when rates are low, everybody floods in, and that's what our company saw. We saw people paying $10, $20, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 over asking for the sales price of a home. And the way they justified it is they say, oh, but I get a 3 or 4% interest rate. Versus when the market is not as hot, because interest rates are a little higher, let's say 6 to 7%, you typically don't have as much competition because there's not as many buyers in the market. And even though your interest rate is higher, you can always refinance later down the line, typically for most homes. So in 3-4 years, if the interest rates go back to 3%, refinance, and you could go from 7 to 3% and reap the benefits. Versus if you have a 3% interest rate, but you overpaid $60,000 for your home in order to outbid other buyers, you can never change that principle. You're never going to change the sales price of your home. The interest rate can be changed, but the sales price of your home can't be changed. Obviously, it's a little bit more complex than that. You have to look at taxes, interest, your principal, your interest. There's a lot that goes into the payment of your home, but don't obsess over the interest rate. Look at the whole picture. And if you find a home that is a good, fair deal, the seller is offering favorable terms, even though the interest rate might be a little high, even though your Theo at the barbecue might brag that their interest rate is 3%, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't purchase the home, because you can always refinance. And that's something that I did. I'm not just saying that to you. That's something that I did. Even though the interest rate was higher for my home, I still went forward and purchased it because I knew that I can always refinance if interest rates ever go below what my interest rate was. So those are my biggest tips for buying a new home. I hope this video was helpful. I have to run to an appointment, so that's why I did it a little bit fast. But if you guys have any questions, if you guys have questions on finding a good real estate agent, finding a good property, where may be the best place to purchase, how to purchase your home, anything further that I can help you with, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. And even though this was a little different, leave a comment below if you found this video helpful so that we can keep keep making content more like this. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you have a great rest of your 2023, and we'll see you next time.